And we're live. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Renny Show. Hi, Jenny. How are you?
I am really well, thank you. How are you?
Not too bad at all. Cold, but yeah, managing to keep warm, so it's all good. So if you're watching with us, the whole premise of the Renny Show is that it's recorded live, and Jenny and I both ask each other 3 questions each, but neither of us know in advance what those questions are going to be. So it could go anywhere, couldn't it, Jenny? Which is always half the fun, we think. So if you're watching, please do pop us a comment. Otherwise, some of the social media platforms don't tell us you're watching. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments. And if you're watching on replay, then pop us a hashtag replay as well. So, Jenny, we're going to be talking about people pleasing today, aren't we?
We certainly are.
Could be a very interesting one.
A topic close to my heart.
Indeed. So I think it's going to be a very, very interesting one. So let's get started. So I'll ask my first question. Is there a positive side to being a people pleaser?
Oh, that's tricky to start with, Rach. People pleasing, I believe, is a personality trait. And of course, there is always a strength in personality traits. So it's about balance.
Yes.
So I think as with any trait, personality or otherwise, it's about understanding. It's about understanding what's involved, and it's about how it serves you and when it gets in the way. So it's really, it's like yes, and yes,
Yeah.
there are positives, and we also have to be aware of when it becomes out of balance or overused.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key for me. It's the balance of it, isn't it? And trying to strike the balance that works for the individual. You know, because there's nothing wrong with wanting to help people. But when it's extreme people pleasing, then, you know, obviously that has some negative effects, which I'm sure we will cover throughout our questions today.
Yes, we will. And I think, the as ever, it's about understanding when you're doing something to help somebody else, if it is at detriment to yourself,
yes,
that's when the balance starts to, or when you consider other people's needs and ignore your own.
Yeah.
Those are things to watch out for.
Yeah, definitely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so your turn.
It may
Bear with me while I type it in.
It may not have escaped your notice that we are right at the end of December.
November.
So we are November. What did I say? December. Oh, we are right at. Let's rewind. We're right at the end of November.
We are.
So Advent and Christmas will be creeping up on us very, very fast.
Absolutely.
So my question, and it is linked to people pleasing. It'd be interesting to see whether it's obvious or subtle for you.
Okay.
So my question is, what's your biggest challenge?
At this time of year?
At this time of year, yeah.
Okay, I'm just typing that in to get it up.
What's your biggest challenge of the festive season? And it seemed to start earlier this year. Was it just me? People got to the beginning of November and people were putting their trees up, which they are perfectly entitled to do. But I was thinking, oh, hang on a minute. It's November. I'm not ready in December, let alone November.
Yeah. I've noticed that people are doing it earlier this year as well. There's definitely something about 2023 that's a bit different in many ways. But I think biggest challenge at this time of year, and I like this question actually in terms of people pleasing, because it's juggling everything, particularly the things that are aimed at children. So I have never relented and had an elf on the shelf, because I acknowledge that whilst they're fun, I do not have the time to make lots of mess, or the time nor the inclination to make lots of extra mess and have to do things every day that are new and exciting that the elf has done. That said, a number of years ago, someone told me about kindness elves, and there's a whole backstory to it. There's a book that comes with it. There's a little house and these little figures, and they encourage children to do kind deeds for other people, which is a concept I can really, really get behind. So we have done the kindness elves for the last few years. And when it started, I perhaps put a lot of pressure on myself for the benefit of the children to make sure it was done every night. And I really, I'd beat myself up if I hadn't done it one night because I saw the kids' disappointed faces in the morning. Whereas now I'm a bit more realistic about it. I want to do it because I like seeing the joy. I mean, the eldest doesn't believe it anymore, which is fair enough. But the youngest still does. So I still like the joy on her face when she sees what they're doing or what they've asked. But I keep it really simple. And if there are days that it doesn't get done, then it doesn't get done. And I just say to her, oh, well, they must have been super busy last night. Perhaps they'll come tonight instead, and just this endless cycle that lots of people seem to end up in at this time of year, with constantly juggling what's going on with the elf on top of the inevitable ground rush towards, like the massive rush towards Christmas to get everything done, to get the food, to get the presents, to get this, to get that, and make Christmas magical. And I think if you're a people pleaser, this is a time of year that's really hard because you're going to want to do as many things as you can to make other people happy. And to a degree, that's where I'm coming from. I absolutely want to make it a magical time of year because I love Christmas and I want it to be magical for the kids as well. However, I draw boundaries now to make sure that I protect myself as well. So yeah, that's my take on it. What do you think? Oh, I can't hear you. Oh no. Oh my goodness me, we've got no sound.
Oh, what's happened?
Oh, there we go. You're back. Right, carry on. Your thoughts.
Oh, that was a scary moment, wasn't it? Oh, I think, yes, I think we all put ourselves under the most enormous amount of pressure, and I think so often, Christmas becomes more and more materialistic, and we've got all the added pressure of Facebook and social media and all of those things. And I saw a wonderful thing the other day, and it really struck me. And in fact, if I'd been smart, I'd have asked this kind of question. But it said about, when you ask children what they remember, their earliest memories of Christmas.
Yes.
They don't remember the presents they had. They remember things like, the excitement and the Christmas lights on the Christmas tree, and the memories of people being together and being read stories to. And so quite often, and I used to, when my children were little, I used to have, way before the elf, something that some Christmassy thing that would appear around the house every day. So it might be a Christmas picture, or it might be an angel somewhere or whatever. And lovely. I did it because I enjoyed doing it. It was really to please me. And also it was a way of kind of decorating, but decorating gradually. So it wasn't it was a kind of an Advent thing. And then when they were older, I kind of and I'd got divorced and moved house, and so I didn't do it. And in fact, the last year in our family house, I didn't do it, and I thought nobody noticed, and the boys were devastated. They were like, "Oh, you haven't done it," and I was like, "Well, I thought nobody noticed because nobody ever commented." And they went, "But it's part of the whole thing. It doesn't feel like Christmas without it." So I think we can get really carried away in and putting ourselves under pressure. And I remember, my mincemeat had to be homemade for my mince pies, you know, Christmas cakes. I've never been able to bring myself to buy a Christmas cake. I just can't. I get as far as the shelf with the Christmas cake on it, and I think, no, I can't do it. I just can't, because it's not hard to make a Christmas cake. And it's something I've always done. But there is a point where now I would think, do you know, at the end of the day, if I don't have time to make, or inclination, to be perfectly honest, if I don't have time or inclination to make a Christmas cake, the sky is not going to fall in because I buy one from wherever. And I think that's the thing. So often we put ourselves, and then the joy's taken out of it, because if you're rushing around, you know, frenetically under all this pressure to be perfect, and do what everybody else wants, there's no time left over for you, is there? And you end up on Christmas Eve being an exhausted wreck.
Yes. Which is always complicated further for us by the fact my youngest's birthday is on Boxing Day. So everything for the birthday has to be prepped and here before Christmas. So it's an extra kind of thing to have to do before, whilst you're doing all the Christmas prep. So that's proved entertaining. And there are a number of areas within that where I have just tried to give myself a bit of a break, rather than, you know, push yourself to do things that you just can't achieve in the time you've got. So, yeah. Okay, fabulous. Right. So next question then.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think is the most damaging side of being a people pleaser? Damaging to the person who is the people pleaser.
Yes. I think the most damaging, I mean, this is extreme, but it happened to me, so I get it. So I think the most extreme damage is that the people pleaser loses who they are. Because they are so wrapped up in pleasing and supporting everybody else, they lose themselves.
And I think the pressure of being in that situation is absolutely immense. You know, really
and I think that the when you find yourself in that situation, and somebody asks you what you would like, you don't know, because it's so long since you can't answer the question, because it's so long since you have thought about what matters to you, what's important to you, where you're, what you know, how you're living true to your values, and that for me was the kind of the lost brilliance, was the loss of self, really.
Yeah, definitely. It's an awful situation to be in. So, you know, if anyone watching has got any experiences of that, do share them with us, because as always, we like to carry on the conversation and see how these things are impacting all of you as well. You know, I've seen, I suppose, if I think back to childhood and teenage years, I think I was very much a people pleaser. I don't think I really knew for a long time who I was, because my focus was more so on, you know, doing what would make other people happy, or being what other people expected, you know. So I think it really can affect anyone. And I think it probably, whilst it's, you know, it is a personality trait, so there will be some people that really don't have that personality trait, but I still think that doesn't mean they don't necessarily ever experience it. You know, I think it probably happens to everybody, but just to different degrees, you know, much lesser degree perhaps if you don't have the character trait of being a people pleaser. So it's a really interesting one.
Yeah, we talk about, or I talk about often, rampant people pleasers, who are people for whom it is a personality trait, and they're just, you know, I was a rampant people pleaser. It was something I was quite proud of. I think I was quite proud of the fact that I was a people pleaser, because I thought it was a good thing to be.
Yes.
And then there's the phase of kind of resigned, people pleasing. And that's when you know it potentially is an issue and it's out of balance, but you're not quite
Yeah.
sure what to do about it. So you just carry on, but it feels much less comfortable because there's
Yeah.
a recognition that it's out of balance. And then there is the phase where I am now, which is what I call recovery. I'm in recovery.
Yeah.
A recovering people pleaser, because if it's a personality trait that you have, you're never cured. I use that word loosely.
Yes, it's never going to go away, is it?
No. So actually it's about being intense. So once you understand it, and once you understand what balance means for you, because it's different for everybody and it will change depending on the different phases of your life that you're in. But once you understand it, then it becomes easier to manage. So the recovery is the kind of managing it on a daily basis.
Managing it really effectively, I think, is the point there, isn't it? It's, learning how to manage it really effectively. Debs Carey is watching. Hi, Debs.
Hi, Debs.
She says the experience Jenny describes of the negative impact of people pleasing totally resonates with mine. So it sounds like, very similar experiences, and I'm sure there'll be many people that feel exactly the same way on this subject. So thanks for sharing that, Debs. So I think it's your question now, Jenny.
Well, this is, you'd have thought we'd have planned this and everything, because my question is, what stops you from pleasing yourself, or what stops us from pleasing ourselves? If you like, putting ourselves first.
Okay, I'm just typing that in.
So what stops us from pleasing ourselves?
So that's a really good question, I think. I think there are a number of things. The first one that strikes me is when you're a parent, and that there will be differences but similarities for mums and for dads on this one. It purely depends on the particular dynamic of that relationship with the children. But I think when you have a person who's dependent on you, then it's very, very easy. You put them first, you put their needs first, and you just fall to the bottom of the pile. And that can obviously be very damaging, because you stop looking after yourself. As we've alluded to already, you start losing who you really are. And I think it's quite common for parents to end up being, in my personal example, I stop being Rachel and I'm just mum. That's the analogy, I suppose. And I think it's so easy for that to happen because of the innate need to look after and nurture that child and all the rest of it. I think there comes a time, I think sometimes it comes with age. It also comes with personal development and self-awareness. But there's a stage where you have to look at that, and coming back to balance, like you've said, you have to try and strike some kind of balance between, putting yourself first, i.e. fitting your life vest before you fit the life vest of the person dependent on you. I know it's an overused analogy, but it's really true. And I think for me, that's something I still struggle with at times, because I feel, as lots of us do, a real pull to nurture and care for and look after and help my children. And you can easily start just falling a bit. You might not end up at the bottom again, but it's easy to start falling down the ladder in terms of priorities. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying for a moment that having children is a bad thing. It's one of the best things I've ever done. But I do think for many, many people, it's a common experience when you become a parent. I imagine you'd probably agree, Jenny.
Yep. And I think also for people, it's not just about children, is it? So there are many other kind of dependencies. So it might be, there are, and I think it gets more complicated when you have blended families. I also think it's really easy at work to do the same thing. So in a work setting, it can be not, wanting to fit in, wanting to
Yeah.
be part of the team, wanting to be, in the in crowd, all of
Yeah.
that stuff.
Expected. Yeah.
So I think that there are many work scenarios which and I in a work scenario, I would suggest that actually burnout is if I haven't done the research, but I suspect
Yeah.
that it would be there would be a link between
Yeah.
people pleasing and burnout, because it's that and so often people at work will say, and I hear it all the time with my clients, or they've just asked me
Mm.
if I can cover for, they've
Mm.
just asked me if I can, and of course you want to, if you're going for promotion, you want to be seen to be, accommodating and helpful and useful and all of those things. But again, you can be taken advantage of, can't you?
Yeah.
So I think it works in many environments.
Absolutely. And I think there's an added complication when it's in the adult environment, because with children, depending on their age, if they're really young, then they're not going to be talking back to you. They're just going to be gurgling and whatever. So there isn't the exchange of ideas. Whereas in the adult environment, thinking about workspaces and that type of thing, or elderly parents, or all these sorts of different relationships, they're a fully formed human being in their own right, with their own thoughts, with their own things that they say, which might be mean or might not. There's many things that can happen, but I think that does add an extra element of difficulty in navigating it. If you are a people pleaser, it just adds an extra layer of difficulty and can really keep you where you are unless you proactively choose to do something about it. So
Yeah.
Okay, right. So I shall move on to my last question. So, Jenny, what is your top tip to try and reduce someone's propensity to be a people pleaser? Now, based on personal experience, what's one thing you did that helped you with this?
The biggest thing that helped me was a lovely quote from Brené Brown, which I still have stuck on my wall, which is clarity is kind.
Yeah.
So one of the things that people pleasers aren't great at, me, was being clear in my boundaries, and so because I didn't want to upset anybody,
Yeah.
and so I wasn't clear. I used to marshmallow it, so I'd think I'd
Yeah.
been really clear, and it was so squishy. People didn't really know where they stood. What was I? So that was a bit of a nightmare. So for me, the biggest change was clarity is kind. So
Yeah.
actually, by saying, when somebody'd say to me, could you do this? Old Jenny, young Jenny, previous incarnation would have
Yeah.
said, well, I could possibly do that if I move that, and I might be able to do this if I could do,
Yeah.
and I'd really like to help. Whereas, and they'd be going, oh, I was doing my working out as I was
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they'd be, oh. Whereas now I would say, I can't do Tuesday. I could do Wednesday.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's a brilliant analogy to describe, and I think it's a fantastic quote. Clarity is kind. It's it's so short yet so meaningful, and I think can make a huge difference. I mean, it's clearly made a huge difference for you. So that's amazing. Yeah. I think that the other thing, I guess I would add, I think there's a lot to do here with the value you place on yourself. And your contribution, you, not just what you can add to someone else's situation, but what you're adding to the world just by being you and by being alive. And obviously that can be quite difficult, if you've got that personality trait. perhaps it stands to reason that it might be difficult to have a really strong sense of self-love, to value you and to put yourself first, because you've always got this propensity to be the people pleaser. You're almost trying to fight against your natural personality trait around it. So I do think that's an important part of it as well. Self-love, and again, that's something that you can't just flick a switch or click your fingers and that suddenly comes into being, can you? It's that's a process in itself, and probably a lifelong journey. I think, as with most things around personal development, you can take huge leaps and bounds forwards, but it's a lifelong journey. It doesn't stop just because you get somewhere better. You keep developing. It's like there's that Pandora's box thing, isn't it? Once you've opened it, it just keeps coming. So,
and I think that's why I use the term recovery.
Yes,
recovering
absolutely.
people pleaser,
Yeah.
because it's an intention. I have to work at it, and
Yeah.
and I and it's understanding your triggers, what triggers that kind of rampant people pleasing, and also understanding, are there other environmental factors like Christmas, where people's expectations that will make you have to be more intentional, or you choose and recognize that you choose that just for Christmas Day and Boxing Day you're going to be a rampant people pleaser, and that's okay. But then you can go back to, so I think it is that self-awareness is that it's always our, we've talked a lot, haven't we, about the gift that keeps on giving. You're never done.
No. Always learning and changing, developing. Okay, right, so I think it's time for your last question.
Well, this is really funny because my last question is, Rachel, what top tip do you have for resigned? I was very specific for resigned people pleasers. So those are the people pleasers who kind of know they do it, but they don't know what that first step might be. So what would your top tip be for them specifically?
Okay, so for people that just, so I guess they feel they don't have a choice. It's just how it is, and they accept that that's how they are. I think one thing I always come back to, and I think this applies to so many situations in life, is the serenity prayer, which you may or may not be aware of. And I don't say this for religious reasons. I'm not particularly religious, but I think the words of the serenity prayer are really, really powerful. And when you can look at imbuing your life decisions with it, I think it's really powerful. So whether you choose to use the word God or not, when I say God, please insert deity of your own choice. But God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I just think that's so powerful. Doesn't mean it's always easy to work out which bits you can accept and which bits you can change, but proactively trying to do that, even if it just starts with a brain dump onto paper of what do you think you can change. It has to start somewhere. It might be that you pick up a personal development book that's been recommended to you because it might help give you some insight into whichever area of your life it is that you want to change. But I think it's perhaps difficult with resigned people pleasers because they've resigned themselves to it. So they've accepted that that's how things are and that's how it's going to be. And I suppose there is a level of confidence required to be able to say, okay, maybe it doesn't have to be quite like this. But that first step has to come from somewhere. So taking some kind of proactive action has to be the place to start. But I guess it's a difficult one because it's going to be different for each person as well as to what resonates the most for them. But I would always say to anyone, if there's something that you're not happy with, using kind of the principles of the serenity prayer, just do a big brain dump onto paper. And if something that you've then written down isn't bringing you joy, what can you do about it? You know, and I imagine that being a resigned people pleaser isn't going to bring them any joy. So if it doesn't bring joy, you know, take the first step.
It's absolutely, it's funny. I remember my very first coaching session, and I was obviously talking to my coach,
Yeah.
and she said, "Oh, I'm hearing, you know, in what you say, I'm hearing quite a lot of you putting other people's needs above
Yeah.
your own." And I and I said, "Oh yeah, I used to do that, but I used to do that,
I'm
but
cured.
I'm cured." And she just went, "Hmm." And there was a pause, and
Yeah.
I kind of went, I'm getting the feeling that you think that's not accurate."
Yeah.
And she said, "I think there's quite a lot more work to do."
Yeah.
So again, that for me, that was a real kind of, um
Yeah.
the level of awareness was really, I kind of, there's, as we know with coaching and self-development, there's the kind of, you start here and
Yeah.
you dip your toe in, and then gradually over the years you kind of immerse yourself
Yeah.
over and over again, don't you? So I think that, so my when I talk about resigned, it's that thing about when you know you'd like to do something differently, but you're not quite
Yeah.
sure what that
Yeah.
might look like. Actually, sometimes it helps to talk to somebody else,
Yeah.
somebody else who's been there, somebody else somebody you trust, who you can have that conversation with, so
Yeah.
that you have the opportunity to kind of think about, well, what are those small things that I could do differently that are manageable for me?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where the power of coaching comes into play, because if you speak to someone like a coach, then, you know, if I'll flip that round. If you're speaking to a best friend, a family member, you know, they're going to quite often say what you want to hear. They're not going to challenge you necessarily in a way that a coach would, you know, saying back to you, well, have you actually got rid of that? You know, sometimes it's
Especially especially if they're the people who you're pleasing.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think, you know, having that third party who's not biased can make a real difference in conversations like that. And just, you know, the self-awareness that helps to develop can only be a good thing. You know, it's all part of that journey, isn't it, to get into where you want to be. So fabulous. Well, this has been a really interesting one about people pleasing. I absolutely love. So it's rampant, resigned, and recovering people pleasers. So if anyone watching, which one do you think you are? You know, do you think you have this personality trait? If you do, tell us which one you think you have, because it's absolutely fascinating, and we can carry on the conversation.
Or maybe you've been all three like me.
Yes.
It's a process.
Yeah.
And maybe you have been all three, or are all three at different times in your, in your day, in your week, depending on what's going on. And as always,
Absolutely.
there's no judgment attached to any of these. They're just
No.
simply ways of describing, because when I first started using them,
Yeah.
they resonated with people. They went, "Oh, that's me. I
Yeah.
do that." Um,
It just
so
makes sense.
there's no judgment attached to any of these. They're just kind of conversation starters. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're not
Fantastic.
labeling.
No. Okay, well, to anyone that's joined us, thank you very much for being with us. We do hope you'll join us again in 2 weeks' time, which will be the 13th of December. Oh, my goodness. And our theme for next time is Christmas challenges. You know, those things around the festive season that can really prove quite challenging to the way we're feeling. So please do join us again for that one. Same time, same place, 12:30, live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And do we tell them, Jenny, about what's coming in January? Shall we spill a little bit of what's coming?
I think we could spread a little bit of magic, couldn't we?
I think we could, couldn't we?
We're very excited.
We're so excited. So Jenny and I have decided to make the Renny Show available on all the podcast platforms as well. It will still be the live streamed single take, warts and all, take us as you find us, and see where the journey goes. But we're going to make it into a proper podcast as well, and have it available on all the podcast channels. So watch this space, because at the beginning of January, we will then start our launch procedure to get ready for the launch at the end of January, which is very exciting. So we're here to stay, aren't we, Jenny? I think is the main message behind that.
Absolutely. And there's one more very no, we're going to leave that in December on our December show. There's one more exciting piece of information that we will be sharing with you about our podcast.
And you're just going to have to come back, aren't you, to find out what that is. Come back on the 13th.
Sorry, the sunshine's just come out in my office. That's because we've had it. That the sunshine's just come out. I think there's a whole metaphor there, isn't there?
Yes.
The Renny Show always makes me feel sunshiny.
Me too.
Whatever my mood beforehand, half an hour on the Renny Show, and I'm set up for the day.
Absolutely. Love it. Yeah, me too. Me too. So thank you, Jenny, you wonderful human being. Thank you to all of you that have tuned in or commented. And please keep the conversation going. We like to talk, don't we?
Funny that we do, don't we? Lovely as ever to chat with you, Rachel, and we'll see you in a fortnight.
All right, take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.